Welcome to Unscripted and Unstoppable. I'm your host, Lorraine Quick, and this is a space for honest conversations about the inner work women are doing as they navigate through change, through loss, through identity shifts, through whatever is coming next for them after 50. Today's conversation continues into a tender and often misunderstood terrain: parent-child estrangement. In this episode, we are holding the experience from the adult child's perspective. For many adult children, a distance from a parent is not chosen lightly. It's it's rarely sudden, and it's almost never free of grief. Often it is a quiet reckoning, shaped by years of trying to stay connected loyally, with love, and then a decision is made that this is just not working and it's time to let the relationship go. This is not an episode that is about taking sides. It is a conversation about complexity, about grief that doesn't always have a language, and about the difficult work of differentiating without erasing love. This episode is a companion to a previous conversation I recorded from the parent's perspective, not as a counterpoint, but as a parallel truth. Because estrangement doesn't live on one side of a story, it lives in the space between people. My guest today is Marta Justina. Marta is an intuitive therapist and guide who works with high achieving professionals. And in that work, she has supported adult children navigating estrangement, boundary setting, and the long emotional aftermath of family rupture. Her work centers on compassion, responsibility, and self-trust, especially in places where there are no clean resolutions. Together, we will explore what leads adult children to step back, face the guilt and the grief that often lingers, and how they can learn to live meaningful, connected lives, even when family relationships remain unresolved. If this topic is personal for you, I invite you to listen gently, take breaths, and take breaks if needed, and know that you are not alone. Marta, let's begin. My first question to start is, from your experience, what is usually happening internally for an adult child or with an adult child before they decide to take a step back from a parent?
It's like the only way to describe it is an emotional turmoil. It's, as you rightly said earlier, that it's not a decision that comes suddenly, and it's not a decision that comes lightly. The decision to step back from the relationship with your parent is coming from a place of deep hurt and many years of unresolved grief, pain, arguments, put downs, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
And chances are, if a adult child comes to the conclusion that they simply cannot maintain the relationship with their parent in the same fashion, they're learning how the relationship dynamic has never really served them, and how there's been a very large gap in perhaps superiority or value or maybe felt sense of importance. And it is certainly much more common now than it has ever been before. And I can imagine that that feels more of like a trend that is personally attacking parents, but it's not meant to be an attack. It's meant to be a plea, really, to say, I'm so hurt that the only option I have left is to stop communicating with you. And no child at any point in time wants to sever the relationship with their parent, because no matter how old you are, you want to be able to rely on mom or dad or both for moments that make you want to cry and that you want to be held. So there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of uncertainty about whether or not this is the right path to pursue. So it's a decision that comes from a desire to make amends, but perhaps the realization that that's no longer possible.
Hmm. It's as you were talking, it was like it's almost like saying, I'm going to make myself an orphan,
Hmm.
right? I
And
can't
no one
even
wants to do
imagine.
that.
No, no.
No,
Yes, we always want our parent, our mother, our father to be in our lives. Even if
yeah,
it's, I mean, even after long after my parents have passed, they are there emotionally for me, right? So this is to me, it must be a tremendous, devastating decision to have to make.
absolutely. And it, there might be this misunderstanding that when we're older, it might not be that big of a deal, or that the adult children aren't grieving this loss, or that they should maybe get over it in the first place and not pursue the disconnection. But life doesn't always get easier, we just get stronger, but we get stronger because of our resources, our values, and especially the people around us and the ways that they've built us up. And when we lose such an important piece of our lives and of our foundation, life no longer feels as easy to manage.
Hmm.
And to make the decision to step away from a parent or parents or a family altogether is grief that they're going to carry for the rest of their lives,
Hmm.
unless that these adult children do pursue individual therapy and come to a place of true acceptance and fulfillment of their lives beyond the relationship with family. And that is absolutely possible. Unfortunately, some healing just has to happen at a distance. There
Hmm.
has to be deep forgiveness and deep self-love as well. But sometimes that just means that there cannot be any welcoming conversations happening, and that can be incredibly difficult, but um, through through the right support that can be possible, but it's never desired.
You know, it's interesting because I think parents experience this estrangement as sudden and sometimes a lot of times a surprise. While children, it seems, they have been, from their perspective, signaling distress for a while, if not years. And so it's been building up and it's not a surprise to them. It's a last resort. It's a final choice. Why do you think these two realities, these two different experiences exist side by side?
Oftentimes when the conclusion that the child adult comes to step away from the family, that doesn't come easily. It doesn't come from minor ruptures in the relationship. There is a long line of pain that was caused, and oftentimes parents just don't see and don't understand the hurt that they've caused their children. Not because they're bad parents, although there's a category for those, but
Mhm.
simply the culture, how they were brought up, not being able to know anything different. You know, baby boomers, for example, had very difficult lives depending on where they are in the world. You know, whether you're immigrants or whether your parents passed in a war, and there's generational trauma. So mistreatment of family members is very common, but it's understood that that's held within the containment of love. But our generation, or the younger generations really, are starting to come to the realization that love and pain don't coincide, that there isn't really space for both. And there's a lot more people willing to take drastic measures to break those generational trauma patterns. And sometimes that looks like having to rupture the relationship. But so for parents, for them, it feels so sudden because arguments are a part of their nature. It's what they're
Mhm.
used to. They're used to being told off. They're used to maybe silent treatments and swearing and all these different things of people expressing negative feelings towards them. But they always expect it to come back because that's often what families were like. You argue, you're mean to each other, you take space, and then you come back like nothing happened. Well, eventually they don't come back because to those adult children, a lot has happened.
Mhm.
And the parents might not simply realize that, oh, they were being serious, that, their arguing towards me isn't a reflection of the pattern I'm used to. This is actually their way of setting a boundary that I simply have no idea how to do because no one's ever done it, and I don't even know what it means. Now, on the flip side, I can imagine that for the adult children, sometimes what happens is there's a lack of communication and clarity within communication. And people might say that they've expressed themselves and shared the hurt and declared what sorts of boundaries have to be put in place and what changes are expected in order for the relationship to flourish, when in fact they're actually not doing those things simply because they're scared to do it. They think that if they, drop hints here and there, that mom or dad will get
Pick
it.
on it. Yeah.
But sometimes it comes down to having like a sit down conversation where there's no distractions. It's very serious. No one's trying to make jokes. No one's trying to diffuse the tension, but simply sit in the tension and let it get as high as it needs to be and say what needs to be said. And rarely do those moments happen. And without that clarity and intention, parents might not understand that those subtle hints were meant to be big bursts of pleas and help and
Hmm.
anger. So I can see why there's going to be miscommunication and misunderstanding on in both parties as to, why is it not getting across to them. But oftentimes parents also think that because their love is unconditional, that they're allowed to do and say things that perhaps the child isn't willing to accept. And but I know that there's this saying, I brought you into this world. And so there's that expectation of I can do whatever I want. If I need you at the drop of a hat, you're there for me. And if I need you to take care of me for a week or whatever it is, there's that expectation that the kids always have to be there to return the favor, so to speak. But it's not a favor, and so there's just a lot of
Hmm.
cultural norms, um, identities and beliefs that have been passed on throughout the generations that aren't spoken, but are simply accepted as rules to the family.
To me, this is fascinating. And as you share this, I think a lot of my own family. And I'm a baby boomer, and I grew up in a family that about, we didn't talk about what I would call meta things. We didn't talk about how things were happening or how we felt, or we did exactly what you said. Might have a big blow up, and then everyone comes back the next day and pretends it never happened. And we love each other and we move on. And then when I raised my own children, I did make assumptions that that would be the same, but my daughters were more assertive and sharing with me, ding, 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 pay attention, mom. I'm saying something really important to you right now. And I was, for whatever reason, lucky enough to actually hear the ding, ding, dings. Okay, wake up. Something important's happening here that I have no clue about. And it took us, I think, it took us a few years to kind of, as they matured into adults, to kind of figure this whole thing out in terms of what they needed and wanted from me, what I could give to them as their mother. But so I was blessed to have those conversations with them. But fundamentally, what you are telling me, what I'm hearing is, oh my gosh, the nature of the family has shifted. With this generation, after baby boomers, how adults look at the family and the behaviors in the family and the dysfunction of the family is now shifted. And we are not, as a society in general terms, willing to willing to accept dysfunction. We want
Absolutely.
we want healthy relationships. Wow. And truly, when I look back at my own family, we were dysfunctional in a lot of ways. And we lived with it. We just, that was kind of who we were, right? And it was very rare for us to have conversations around what just happened here. And
Mhm.
this is disrupting us, right? So we
Yeah.
would maybe once, I think I can only think of one time we actually had a conversation like that in my entire growing up years and as an adult child of of my parents. So this is quite interesting to me in terms of just this is a psychological and sociological cultural shift that's going on in our world. Um, yeah, and this is the pain also of that change.
Yep.
Yeah, huge,
Absolutely.
amazing. So adult children, they are also grieving. And I would imagine their grief is probably very rarely acknowledged. What kind of loss do they experience when they still have a parent alive, but they just no longer have access to that parent?
It's almost like this realization that as the parentified child, that chances are they were when they were children, that now that has evolved as they've gotten older. And now it's almost like you are your parent. Not only were you put into the role of an adult and as a parent to your parents growing up, which is is terrible for children to have to go through. Anytime that a child is seen consoling a parent, that is not a healthy dynamic because it's expecting this tiny nervous system that has a very small understanding of how the world works is now supporting this giant nervous system that has so much more wisdom and experience and hopefully emotional intelligence to be able to handle its own waves of highs and lows. And um, young children, when parentified, grow up to be people pleasers. They grow up to be very self-sacrificing, um, have poor boundaries, and don't really know who they are because their whole life has depended on them being whatever someone else needed them to be to make sure that the situation didn't get out of hand. And
Mhm.
so when adult children decide that they are going to end that relationship for the time being or forever, they are now just they're justifying, you know what? I am in fact my own parent. I have always felt that way, but now I've decided I'm no longer going to have a parent. So they now embody that the parent within them. They might be more disciplined, they might be more critical, they might find themselves simply struggling a lot more because the very foundation of who they are that they can rely on, that has taught them so many things, they've now chosen to be distant from. And so it's like losing a part of yourself.
Mhm.
And it's really, really hard. And it's a beautiful reflection of self-love. And I think that nowadays self-love is seen as this like really pretty, light and airy sort of conversation. And self-love truly is not. It's, being willing to hold yourself during your toughest moments and not hide from the pain and not try to distract yourself from it. And it's walking away from a parent that continues to hurt you in ways that you never imagined a parent could.
Mhm.
And it's it's a beautiful reflection of their strength and ability to be able to speak up and allow their inner child to finally voice everything that they had to hold inside. Um, And they're going to have to learn how to trust again. Because if you lose that relationship, your ability to trust people and welcome nurturance especially
Mhm.
is going to be incredibly difficult. And looking up to people is going to feel like a very rare occasion because they no longer want anyone to be above them, so to speak. They don't want to seek out or look up to anybody because
Or depend upon.
or depend upon.
Yeah. I would think this is a very traumatic experience. There's trauma
Definitely.
here. Trauma on both sides, but there is trauma on both sides.
Oh, yes. No parent shows up in a way that could be in some ways neglectful or hurtful because they want to.
Hmm.
And a part of the healing process for the adult child, But eventually, the parent is that all parents do the best they can with what they've got. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they've got. And if parents knew better, hopefully they would do better. If they
Hmm.
had the awareness, if they had the intelligence, if they had the capacity, if they had the support, I'm sure every parent would want to be a million times better than they are. But unfortunately, in many ways, we are victims to our surroundings and to our upbringing.
Hmm.
And, some of us are lucky enough to have someone plant a seed about what a healthy relationship looks like. Others simply don't. And, parents are doing the best, but sometimes the best isn't enough. And coming to that realization is incredibly painful for both the child and the parent because no child wants to call out their mom or dad. There's so much guilt embedded within children at any age to
Hmm.
say that mom or dad didn't show up in the best way possible. And getting over that guilt requires a lot of grief and pain and almost shame to think, how could I want more from my parent? But in and of itself, that's a very healing experience to finally say, you know what, I'm important enough to say that mom and dad wasn't perfect and they've hurt me in so and so ways. And if they're not willing to change, which really most adult children just want to see present day change, ideally mixed with past apologies. I'm so sorry for X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do better now. Some people don't even want to look at the past. They'll say, you know what, dad, mom, don't worry about the things that have happened. Let's just move into the future differently. And that's the issue, It's as long as we can move forward, creating a healthier relationship between child and parent, so many issues would be resolved. If we just focus on the past and try to apologize for that, but make no strides towards the future, that'll mean nothing. And so kids are very open to resolutions,
Hmm.
um, and they won't just give up for no reason.
Right. And then at the same time, you hear this phrase, no contact. And it's from the parent's point of view, it is often framed or feels like a punishment. How do you help people distinguish between setting boundaries rooted in, self-preservation, basically, and actions that are driven or decisions that are driven because of their unresolved anger?
When you make a decision from a place of wanting better for yourself,
Hmm.
the way that you approach a situation in a conversation or anything is calm, it's grounded, it's quiet, if I can use those words to describe it. There's no need to assert dominance or create a sense of threat in the relationship.
Okay.
Oftentimes that'll come from this like, I'm in a regulated state if we're looking at the nervous system. We're not in fight or flight. We're just like, you know what? I've thought this over and I with very polite language and no raising of the voice and no aggressive body language. When the child can say, you know what, mom, dad, I just can't do this anymore. Like this relationship is simply too much for me. I need to take a step back from my mental health or for whatever reason. And please don't reach out to me. Please, I need this break. If I'm ready, I'll do so. Or reach out to me when you've started therapy or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, if it comes from anger, there's going to be a lot of outbursts. There's going to be a lot of emotions. It's very untamed, it's very unfiltered, and very mean. Because when we are scared or we're hurt and we don't know how to regulate our own emotions, we're going to speak from that place and it's going to come out in that same way.
Hmm.
So if someone does something when they're in an ungrounded state of mind, I would say that that's not the authentic decision for them.
So there would be a calmness,
Hmm.
a resolve. I'm
Hmm.
resolved for this,
Yep.
for this moment in time. I'm resolved. This is what I need, and this is what I'm asking for.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and then an expectation that that would be honored.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you talked about this, the guilt of the adult child. how do they deal with that? I am, I feel for them. I feel for the parents. How do these adult children um, learn to live with this guilt and not let it consume them?
They learn how to set healthy boundaries.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of rewiring, reframing of the thoughts and beliefs about family that were passed on to them, those unspoken rules,
Hmm.
as I mentioned, and being able to create their own rules for what a healthy family looks like and what a good child would be. A good child doesn't mean that you are complacent and just do as mom or dad say. A good child is one that loves their parents, respects them, and there's we can add so many other points to that, but it's not just about being passive, but in fact being active in the parent's life, caring for them, loving them, it's something that is undeniable. And the guilt is processed through understanding that family doesn't mean just doing as you're told. That I, as a child, am worthy of respect. And it's not simply respect your elders, but it's mutual respect.
Hmm.
And I choose to believe in love that doesn't lead to pain, and that is my definition of love.
Hmm.
And expecting those that are in our lives to adhere to these rules. They don't have to, but they don't have to be in our lives.
Hmm.
For me, it's if you love me in a way that feels respectful and uplifting, come on in. But if you're gonna belittle me and make me feel bad about myself and my decisions without any constructive feedback and support, I don't welcome that. And it's very intimidating for the parents to be in that sort of conversation and think, how are you standing up to me? Like I could never have done that to my parent.
Hmm.
And it's that realization that choices are available and that it comes from awareness that certain choices were laid out for us and we get to choose differently now. I don't have to follow this tradition or this norm or this expectation. And I can be incredibly respectful and polite to you when I break these rules. But as long as those new rules and perhaps boundaries are set from a place of genuine love, then it's very hard to have to decline those and say, nope, I want to be mean to you and still come over for Sunday brunch. It's quite understandable for parents to start to understand, okay, you know what? If this is not how my child wants to be spoken to, I now have to take myself off of the pedestal that I've been put on, that in my mind I should be on as the parent, and that I get to see my child as their own person that I brought into this world and that I love, and that they have their own value and their own purpose, and that I get to be one of the beautiful pillars in their life for how they got here, but nothing more than that.
Yeah. It's funny. I do think a lot about my relationship with my daughters. This will sound probably weird, but at first I thought, okay, it's like we're on a planet together when we are a family and we are rotating around the universe, right? Just doing our thing. And then they jettison off as they become adults and they become their own planet. And my planet is in the same universe as
Hmm.
theirs, and we interact together, but their planet is their planet and my planet is mine. And to me, what I learned, that it sounds crazy, but that helps me remember that I'm in charge of my life,
Hmm.
but my children don't need me to be in charge of theirs. And from all of that, I'm still understanding that I am always going to be their mother, but I am no longer their parent.
Mm.
And for me, that makes a big distinction because they try to keep their children safe. They try to educate their children, teach them things. My children are adults now. They don't need any of that anymore. And it looks and feels like control whenever I try to do that. So I've learned to let that go. And
Yeah.
I know this isn't a conversation about being the best parent, but I think a lot of us still think we're supposed to parent our adult children, and that's not true. And that
No,
may be a source of some of the conflict and problem. Yeah.
absolutely. When you've devoted so many years of your life to being a parent, it's incredibly hard to let that go. And sometimes you don't want to. Some of the best lives are parenthood.
Hmm.
And, even though the kiddos might be ready to start their own lives, doesn't mean that we're ready for them to start their own lives, you know?
Exactly.
And so it's a process, and there's different stages in our lives, and it's simply coming to the acceptance that I may not like this, but I'm no longer number one, or I'm no longer going to be the first person they call when they have a moment, or I'm not going to be there every single morning for breakfast, and it just to cherish the moments while we have them.
Absolutely. And the thing is, if that is true, then your children have grown into wonderful, fantastic adults who are functioning, capable, contributing. They're everything you wanted them to be when they were first born, right? At least for
Yep.
me. So it's almost like it hurts to realize you're
Mhm.
not that close anymore if but that's not appropriate anymore. I did my job. Woohoo!
Yep.
As a parent, right? And now as a mother, I get to enjoy the relationship. But yeah, it is, this is by no means simple. It
No.
is extraordinarily complex, and all kinds of things really do play a role in all of this. So
Mhm.
I am, if you haven't figured it out, I'm loving this conversation.
Good.
Um, when someone steps away, they often lose not just the relationship, but really they lose a role in a family narrative. It's sort of like we always, we had a grandmother, we had a mother, now we don't. How do adults who go through this, how do they rebuild their own identity outside of this original system? What process do they go through?
It really differs for each person, but it comes through the redefining of what love is,
Mhm.
and through that, who they are. Who are they when they no longer have to be silenced, when they don't have to act a certain way to be respectable, or um, that they can wear whatever they want, and it's okay if they gain weight because they're not going to get yelled at by their mom at the next Christmas dinner. It's it creates this sense of freedom um, after all the guilt and the grief has been processed, a sense of freedom to think, wow, I get to, do all the things I wasn't allowed to do because I was so terrified of mom's or dad's reaction to this. And it's by no means is it a lovely decision, but through this pain, if you have to commit to it, you are forced to start looking for the blessings. How can you use this space to the best of your abilities? Because that's what you're doing it for. You're doing it to better yourself. So if you're not bettering yourself, what are you doing? And oftentimes people with children, like the adult children who disconnect from their parents, they want to be better parents to their children.
Mhm.
And they are learning how to respect their child. Now, unfortunately, what's happening in the Western society more so is that we're giving our young children a little bit too much autonomy to make decisions that they're simply not equipped to be making yet.
Mhm.
It looks like trying to give our children the very opposite of what our life experiences were like.
Mhm.
And so this can look like buying your kiddos everything that they ask for because you grew up in a family that couldn't afford anything. Well, the dangers in that is your children did not grow up in poverty, so now they don't understand what you went through and the scarcity that you experienced and how you learned to value money. What they're experiencing is being spoiled and not understanding the value of money and thinking that they can just snap their fingers and get what they want. And so oftentimes, if without that conscious awareness, parents are trying to do a lot of beautiful things in creating a healthy relationship with their children, which sometimes they do, and sometimes they kind of go on to the other side a little bit too much. But they are learning how to be who they really are
Mhm.
without the fear of judgment and punishment from parents.
And conflict.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, for ages we've done that when we grow up and we say, I'm never going to be like my mother. I'm never going to be like my father when I have kids. So
Mm.
we always have a reaction to what we think was wrong with our childhood, and we try to impose a correction
Yep.
on our children, although sometimes, like you said, the pendulum goes too far.
Hmm.
I think in the end, it comes down to, and actually all of this comes down to, can we have relationships with people that are healthy? And by healthy, I mean there is a level of respect, love, trust, and safety, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really does come down to, I tell everybody, I think that therapy, and I don't necessarily mean conventional therapy, but I mean having the space to talk over what you've been through and having someone validate you and but then help you learn from your experiences,
Mhm.
grow as a person, but ideally to be in alignment with who you truly want to be. I think that, so I just use the word therapy for ease, but I think it should be as common as having a dentist because our emotions, our past experiences, they are showing up in our lives 24/7. A toothache happens here and there.
Mhm.
And if we're not tending to what's going on in our minds, how our bodies feel, and the stories that they have held on to all these years, and how our soul or our essence or our heart feels, we create a certain narrative and we put that energy out into the world. And sometimes it's a lovely energy and sometimes it's not. And we don't understand that it's coming from us
Hmm.
or how to change it or how to be different. And so I would say we can have those beautiful relationships. We just have to learn what caused us not to in the first place. Because the ability to love is so inherent in all of us that all we have to do is unlearn the behaviors that taught us to fear love or to communicate aggressively or to put up walls. It's in our nature to cry and then love being held. We just have to come back to that, and um, it's a process for everybody.
It is. And I couldn't agree more with what you just said. I do think every relationship, it's hard work. And the more honest you are with yourself and the relationship you have with you, the more you can bring integrity and calm and love into the relationships that you have with other people.
Mhm.
And often a therapist, a coach, someone who's trained in this arena can support and assist you in ways that you could not do yourself, as much as we like to think we can do it ourselves. We
Yeah.
need that objective pair of eyes, right, to help us see things we can't see for ourselves. Without going into or turning it into accusations, what kinds of things do you think adult children wish that their parents really understood about their silence, their distance, their decision to separate?
But there is a really strong desire to not do any of those things, that they are so willing to come to a resolution that it they just want to have their parents in their lives. They want to have someone that they can lean on, but they also want to have that sense of peace in their hearts that they can't have otherwise.
Mhm.
And that it really does come down to it being just the last thing that they haven't tried and hoping that this is what'll bring them peace. But the more love that we have in our lives, the better. And so
Mhm.
if these adult children could still have peace within and have a beautiful relationship with their parent, they would choose that option every time.
But
And Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but when they say, please don't contact me, they really want you to honor that. It's
Yep.
not a, oh, but contact me anyway and tell me how much you love me kind of message. It really is. It's like no is no, right?
Yep.
When I make the decision to say that to my mother or to my father, please honor that because I did not make that decision lightly. And if I want that to change, I will reach out to you. Please don't find ways to accidentally run into me at the grocery store or
Yep.
keep sending me birthday cards or doing all the things that, from a parent's point of view, we're trying to reconnect. But the child has said, don't. And the parent should needs to honor that until something shifts or changes or may never shift or change.
Absolutely. And that's incredibly painful. And so I want to validate the listeners, whether you're the parent or the child, that this is incredibly painful. And it does need to be understood what no contact means. To say, I just we can't be in contact. And give those examples of please don't run into me at the grocery store. Please don't try to be where you think I will be,
Yeah.
because that's not what it would look like to honor my request.
Yeah.
And it's creating space for the child to grieve, to finally feel heard. But hopefully, it also gives space for the parent to take time to learn about, what caused this and how they can change it, hoping, that one day the child might want to reach out and, see how things have been and see if there's the potential to reconnect. But if there is that no contact period, the best way that you can respect it is by learning how to be the loving parent that they want you to be, which is quite often the parent that you want to be. And
Ironically, yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And I think too, just as the undercurrent of what you said initially to this question was remember that your child is doing this as this is the this is I've gone down this road. I perceive I've gone down this road and I've got nothing. So this is what I'm having to do. Yes, I would love my mother, my father in my life, but I need to separate now and
Mhm.
respect it. Just respect it. Hmm.
Yep, absolutely.
So hard. So hard. Marta, my last question is for those who may never receive understanding, reconciliation, repair, what does it mean for parent, for child, for, whatever, to live a grounded, meaningful life without closure? What do you think how does that happen or can it happen?
I think that the answer to that is found deep within each of those people's hearts.
Hmm.
When you get to the very bottom of the hurt, and I mean in the very bottom, you've met every scared, hurt, lost, confused part of you, and you no longer carry those pains with you, which would look like complete understanding and acceptance of why they're there. No shaming of, oh, I shouldn't have been upset or I shouldn't have done this. But coming to the conclusion of, I can't change the past. And even though I wish I can, I still accept and love myself. And I'm going to try to do better moving forward. And that would look like whatever is personally meaningful to that individual. How can you turn the pain that you've been carrying into something of purpose? And this often looks like serving others in some way, whether being a parent in this estranged relationship that supports other parents towards growth so that they don't have to experience that. Perhaps it's teaching young kids how to speak up, or being a teacher and being reconnected with children to learn a new perspective to nurturance. The options are endless, but to do something where you can still bring love back into your life, but this time in a way that is true love, meaning that it is uplifting and gentle and heavenly almost. And that would only look like quite committed self-healing of some kind, therapy, coaching, as you mentioned, um, because we can only love others at the capacity at which we love ourselves. It's a quote that all of my clients have heard me say so many
Yeah.
times. Um, and it truly does come down to how well you can connect with yourself. And like you said, how calm you are with yourself, how gentle you are with yourself, how honest you are. That is how honest, calm, and gentle you can be with other people. And so the more work and love that you cultivate with yourself, the more that you can do that with others. And I hope that anybody who experiences this sort of pain, that they do come to a place where they can find love in their heart again.
Wow. This has been an amazing conversation. And to start off, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your compassion, your insight, and your gentle kindness as we've gone through and had this conversation. I think all of my listeners, all of my viewers will really want to hear this episode. So thank you, Marta, very, very much. Um, I, I
Thank you.
also I also want to acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage to stay present in a conversation like this. And so, for those of you listening or watching as an adult child navigating distance from a parent, or vice versa, as a parent navigating distance from their child, I hope that something in today's conversation has helped you to feel less alone and less defined by a single decision, label, or moment of rupture in your life. Estrangement, I think, rarely brings clarity or relief in neat packages. It's extremely complex and it's very confusing and disorienting. And it always comes with grief. It also asks for discernment, for self trust. It asks for the willingness to live with complexity, even when love and distance exist side by side. Whether repair comes or not, whether you're able to reconcile these relationships, your life is still yours to live and to inhabit fully. Your worth is not measured by how much you can endure. And choosing distance does not erase the care, longing, and love that may still be present in your heart. Thank you so much again, Marta, for bringing such thoughtfulness, compassion, and depth to this conversation, and for the care you offer others as they navigate these tender and often misunderstood changes and spaces in their lives. And to my listeners and viewers, thank you for listening, watching to Unscripted and Unstoppable. If this episode stirred something in you, take your time with it, please. Let it settle. You don't have to resolve anything right now. And my friends, until next time, thank you. Have a beautiful day.